6 months ago, I was living in a villa in Dubai with over $10 million, driving luxury cars, managing businesses that generated millions in revenue, and enjoying a life that most people only dream about. Today, I work odd jobs to afford food for my family. We share one small bathroom with 3 other families, and we live in constant fear of being discovered and sent back to face execution. But I would not trade my current situation for my old life, even if I could. Because 6 months ago, despite all my wealth and success, I was dying, and the God I had worshipped my entire life, the God I had prayed to 5 times daily without fail, the God I had given millions to in charity and devotion, was silent. It was Jesus Christ, the one I had been taught was merely a prophet, who heard my desperate cry and healed me when no doctor could. And that healing not only saved my physical life, but opened my eyes to a truth that has cost me everything materially, but given me everything spiritually. This is my testimony, and I am sharing it because I believe others need to hear that Jesus is real, that he still heals today, and that he is worth losing everything to follow. My name is Khalid Al Maktoum, and I was born into one of the wealthiest merchant families in Dubai. My grandfather built a trading empire in the 1960s when Dubai was still a small trading port, and my father expanded that empire into real estate, import-export, and financial investments. By the time I was born, our family name was synonymous with success and influence in the Emirates. I grew up in luxury that most people cannot imagine. Educated in the best schools, traveling the world, and groomed from childhood to take over the family businesses. But my family was not just wealthy, we were also deeply religious. My father was a devout Muslim who made sure all his children understood that our wealth was a blessing from Allah that came with responsibilities. We prayed 5 times daily without exception, fasted during Ramadan with strictness that many considered extreme, gave large amounts to Islamic charities, and lived according to Islamic principles in every area of our lives. Faith was not just a part of our identity, it was the foundation of everything we did. I married my wife Aisha when I was 26 and she was 22. Ours was an arranged marriage between 2 prominent families, but we were blessed that genuine love developed between us over time. Aisha was beautiful, educated, and shared my commitment to Islamic faith and practice. Together we built a life that seemed perfect from the outside. We had 2 children, our son Omar, who is now 10 years old, and our daughter Noor, who is 5. We lived in a spacious villa in one of Dubai's most exclusive neighborhoods, employed a staff of household helpers, and wanted for nothing materially. I was actively involved in managing several of our family's business ventures, particularly our real estate holdings and import operations. I was good at what I did, and our businesses prospered under my management. I also served on the boards of several Islamic charitable organizations and was known in our community as a man of faith and integrity. Life was good, or so I thought. The sickness began so subtly that I barely noticed it at first. I started feeling unusually tired, needing more sleep than normal, but never feeling truly rested, no matter how much I slept. I attributed it to work stress and the demands of managing multiple business projects. But then other symptoms began appearing. I would wake up with severe headaches that would last for hours. My muscles and joints ached constantly as if I had the flu, but I had no fever or other signs of infection. My appetite decreased, and I began losing weight even though I was not trying to diet. After several weeks of these symptoms getting progressively worse, Aisha insisted I see a doctor. We went to one of the best private hospitals in Dubai, where I underwent a battery of tests. The doctors found abnormalities in my blood work, signs of inflammation throughout my body, and indications that my immune system was attacking my own tissues. But they could not determine the underlying cause. Over the following months, I saw specialist after specialist, Rheumatologists, immunologists, infectious disease experts, neurologists. Each one ran more tests, tried different treatments, and ultimately sent me to another specialist when their interventions did not work. I was diagnosed with possible autoimmune disorders. Then those diagnoses were questioned. I was put on various medications, some of which made me feel worse rather than better. No one could give me a clear answer about what was wrong with me or how to fix it. The disease, whatever it was, continued to progress. The fatigue became so severe that I could no longer work full days. The pain in my joints and muscles intensified until even simple movements were agony. I developed neurological symptoms, episodes where I would lose sensation in my limbs or experience severe dizziness and confusion. My digestive system stopped functioning properly, and I could barely eat without becoming violently ill. Within 4 months of the first symptoms appearing, I had lost over 30 pounds and looked like a shadow of my former self. We expanded our search beyond Dubai. I flew to the Mayo Clinic in the United States, to specialists in London, to a renowned autoimmune center in Switzerland. My family spared no expense trying to find answers and treatment. Each place ran their own extensive tests, consulted with colleagues, and ultimately reached the same frustrating conclusion. They could see that something was seriously wrong with my body, but they could not identify the root cause or provide effective treatment. Some doctors suggested it might be a rare form of autoimmune encephalopathy, where my immune system was attacking my brain and nervous system. Others thought it could be a combination of multiple autoimmune conditions happening simultaneously. A few admitted they had never seen anything quite like my case, and were essentially guessing at potential diagnoses. The treatments they tried, various immunosuppressants and steroids and experimental drugs, either had no effect or made my symptoms worse. By the 6th month of my illness, I was confined to bed. I could no longer walk more than a few steps without collapsing from exhaustion and pain. My mind, which had always been sharp and clear, became foggy and unreliable. I would have periods of confusion where I could not remember my children's names or recognize where I was. The headaches became so severe that even light and sound felt like torture. I existed in a state of constant suffering that no medication could adequately address. It was at this point that my family decided to bring me home from the hospital and try spiritual intervention. Despite all our faith in modern medicine and the best doctors money could buy, nothing was working. My father suggested that perhaps this illness had a spiritual component that required spiritual solution. So they brought me home, set up a hospital-quality bed in my room, and began bringing in imams and religious leaders to pray for me. These were not ordinary prayer sessions. The imams who came were known for their knowledge of Islamic spiritual healing and their ability to perform ruqyah, the Islamic practice of using Quranic recitation to treat spiritual ailments and drive out jinn or evil spirits. They believed that my mysterious illness might be caused by demonic oppression or the evil eye, and that Quranic recitation and Islamic incantations could break these spiritual attacks. For over 6 months, imams came to my home daily, sometimes multiple times a day. They would recite specific surahs from the Quran over me, particularly Surah Al-Baqarah, which is believed to have powerful protective and healing properties. They would blow on water after reciting Quran over it, then have me drink it or bathe in it. They performed elaborate rituals involving incense and oils and written verses. Some would place their hands on my head or chest and pray loudly, commanding any evil spirits to leave in the name of Allah. My father, desperate to see his son healed, brought in increasingly prominent religious figures. We had sheikhs from across the Gulf region come to pray for me. One particularly famous imam known for spiritual healing spent 3 days in our home, performing intensive sessions of Quranic recitation and incantations. He was confident he could help me, saying he had seen many similar cases that were resolved through proper Islamic spiritual intervention. But nothing changed. Despite all the prayers, all the Quranic recitations, all the rituals and interventions, I remained just as sick. In fact, I continued to deteriorate. My body was wasting away, my mind was becoming less coherent, and my pain was increasing. The Imams had various explanations for why their prayers were not working. Some said the evil eye on me was particularly strong and required more time to break. Others suggested that someone in my family or business had placed a curse on me that was difficult to remove. A few hinted that perhaps my own sins or the sins of my ancestors were blocking healing. During those 6 months in bed, being prayed over by Imam after Imam with no results, I went through every emotion imaginable. At first I was hopeful and faithful, believing that surely Allah would hear the prayers of so many devoted religious leaders and heal me. Then I became confused and frustrated when the healing did not come. Why would Allah allow me to suffer like this, when I had been faithful to Him, when I had prayed and given and lived according to Islamic law? As the months dragged on, my emotions turned darker. I became angry at Allah, questioning why He had abandoned me despite my lifetime of devotion. I felt betrayed by a God I had served faithfully, but who seemed to care nothing for my suffering. The Imams told me my healing was delayed because of my lack of faith, or because I was not submitting properly to Allah's will, which only made me feel more hopeless and condemned. I reached a point where I wanted to die. The physical pain was unbearable, but the spiritual and emotional anguish was even worse. I felt completely abandoned by Allah, trapped in a body that was destroying itself, watching my wife and children suffer as they witnessed my decline. I would pray for death, beg Allah to just take me and end the suffering. But death did not come either. I remained in this terrible in-between state, too sick to live any kind of meaningful life, but not sick enough to die quickly. The only thing that kept me from complete despair was my children. Omar would come to my bedside every day after school and tell me about his day, trying to make me smile even though I could see the fear and sadness in his eyes. Little Noor, who was only 5 years old and did not fully understand what was happening, would climb carefully onto my bed and snuggle against me, saying, "Baba will get better soon." Looking at their innocent faces, seeing how much they needed me, gave me a reason to keep fighting even when I had no strength or hope left. But as more months passed with no improvement, I began to accept that I was probably going to die. The doctors had started using words like terminal and palliative care in their discussions with my family. They could not tell us exactly how long I had, but it was clear that without identifying and treating the underlying cause of my illness, my body would eventually shut down completely. My family began making preparations for my death, discussing funeral arrangements and how they would manage the businesses without me. During this time, my prayers changed. I stopped asking Allah to heal me and started asking Him to take care of my family after I was gone. I begged Him to provide for Aisha and to watch over Omar and Noor. I asked Him to help my children remember me and to not let my death destroy their faith. I tried to make peace with dying, to accept that this was Allah's will for my life, even though I could not understand why. But even these desperate prayers felt like they were hitting a ceiling and going nowhere. There was a coldness, an emptiness, a void where I expected to feel God's presence. I had prayed to Allah faithfully 5 times a day for over 30 years. But now when I needed Him most desperately, He felt completely absent. The heaven I was crying out to seemed silent and indifferent to my suffering. One afternoon, about 8 months into my illness, I was alone in my room. Aisha had taken the children out for a few hours to give them a break from the heavy atmosphere in our home. My nurses were on break. I was lying in bed feeling particularly weak and miserable, knowing I probably only had weeks or at most months left to live. I had my tablet with me, and I was listlessly scrolling through news and videos, trying to distract myself from the constant pain and the dark thoughts about death. I came across a video of a Christian preacher conducting what looked like a healing service. There was a large crowd, and the preacher was praying for people who came forward claiming various sicknesses and ailments. As a Muslim, I had always been taught that Christian healing services were either fake performances or demonic deceptions. We believed that true healing came only from Allah through Islamic means, and that Christians who claimed Jesus healed people were either lying or being deceived by jinn masquerading as divine power. So my initial reaction was skepticism and even contempt. These people were deluded, I thought, chasing after false miracles. But I kept watching, partly out of morbid curiosity and partly because I had nothing else to do. And as I watched, something about what I was seeing began to challenge my assumptions. The people being paid for did not look like actors or people pretending. They looked genuinely sick, genuinely desperate, like me, and when they testified about being healed, their joy and shock seemed authentic in a way that was hard to fake. The preacher, whose name I will not mention because this testimony is not about promoting any particular person, but about Jesus himself, began speaking directly to the camera. He said that Jesus Christ was the same yesterday, today, and forever, and that the same power that healed people 2,000 years ago was still available today. He said that Jesus loved people and wanted to heal them, not because they deserved it or earned it, but simply because he was compassionate and merciful. Then he said something that arrested my attention completely. He said, "There is someone watching right now who has been sick for many months. The doctors cannot figure out what is wrong with you. Your religious leaders have prayed for you, but nothing has changed. You feel abandoned by God and you are ready to die. But Jesus sees you, Jesus knows your suffering, and Jesus wants to heal you right now." I felt like he was speaking directly to me, describing my exact situation with impossible accuracy. My heart began racing. How could he know? Was this just a lucky guess that happened to match my circumstances? Or was something else happening? The preacher continued, "If that is you, I want you to do something right now. Wherever you are, lift your hands toward heaven. Do not worry about what anyone thinks or what your religion has taught you. Just lift your hands and open your heart to receive what Jesus wants to give you. And I want you to make this declaration out loud. I am healed in Jesus' name. Everything in my Islamic training told me not to do it. This was shirk, the unforgivable sin of associating partners with Allah. I would be calling on a name other than Allah's name for help, which Muslims are strictly forbidden to do. If anyone found out, I would be condemned as an apostate. Even entertaining the idea felt like betrayal of everything I had been raised to believe. But I was also desperate beyond words. I had tried everything else. I had exhausted every medical option, every Islamic spiritual intervention, every prayer to Allah. Nothing had worked. I was dying, and I had nothing left to lose. With trembling hands, I lifted my arms toward the ceiling. My arms were so weak from months of illness that even this simple gesture was difficult and painful. Tears began streaming down my face, and in a hoarse whisper, because my voice was weak from disuse, I said the words, "I am healed in Jesus' name." The moment those words left my mouth, something happened that I cannot fully describe in natural terms. It felt like electricity, but not painful. It felt like warmth, but not from any external source. It felt like liquid light was being poured into my body from the top of my head down through my entire being. The sensation was so strong and unexpected that I gasped out loud. The chronic pain that had been my constant companion for 8 months, the pain that no medication could adequately control, suddenly vanished, not gradually, not partially, but completely and instantly. It was like a switch had been flipped, going from unbearable agony to absolute comfort in a single moment. The fog that had clouded my mind for months cleared instantly. My thoughts became sharp and clear in a way they had not been since before I got sick. The constant nausea that had made eating nearly impossible disappeared. The weakness that had confined me to bed began to lift, and I could feel strength returning to my muscles. I lay there in shock, afraid to move, afraid this was just a momentary reprieve that would fade. But the healing sensations continued, wave after wave of that strange electrical warmth flowing through my body, touching areas that had been sources of pain and dysfunction and restoring them. I could feel it in my joints, in my organs, in my nervous system. It was like my entire body was being reconstructed and renewed from the inside out. I do not know how long I lay there experiencing this. It might have been minutes or an hour. Time seemed to lose meaning. All I knew was that something impossible was happening to me. Something that violated everything I understood about medicine and Islamic theology and the natural order of the world. When the sensations finally began to fade, I found myself lying in bed feeling more physically well than I had in nearly a year. The improvement was not subtle or questionable. It was dramatic and undeniable. I moved my arms and legs experimentally and found they responded with strength and coordination I had not had in months. I sat up in bed, a simple action that had become impossible for me, and I did it easily without assistance. Then, driven by an impulse I did not fully understand, I stood up. I had not been able to stand unsupported in months. But now I stood beside my bed, my legs holding me steady and strong. I took a step, then another, then walked across my room to the window. I was walking normally, as if I had never been sick. I looked at my reflection in the window glass and barely recognized myself. I was still thin from months of wasting illness. But the gaunt, deathly appearance was gone. There was color in my face again. My eyes, which had been dull and lifeless, were bright and alert. I looked like someone who was healing, not someone who was dying. I do not know how long I stood there staring at my reflection and trying to process what had just happened. But eventually I heard voices downstairs. Aisha had returned home with the children. I could hear Omar and Noor talking excitedly about something they had seen while they were out. Without thinking about what I was doing, I opened my bedroom door and walked out into the hallway. I reached the top of the stairs and started walking down them, something I had not done in months. Each step felt miraculous, my body responding the way it was supposed to, without pain or weakness or difficulty. Aisha looked up and saw me coming down the stairs. The shopping bag she was holding fell from hands and crashed to the floor. Her face went through shock, confusion, and then something like fear. She screamed, which brought the children and our household staff running. Omar reached me first, his face a mixture of disbelief and hope. "Baba, you are walking. How are you walking?" Noor ran to me and wrapped her arms around my legs, crying and laughing at the same time. The household staff stood frozen, staring as if they were seeing a ghost. Aisha approached me slowly, as if afraid I might collapse at any moment. She reached out and touched my face, my arms, checking if I was real. "Khalid, what happened? How is this possible? We left you in bed barely able to move, and now you are walking downstairs." I did not know how to answer. I could not tell them the truth, not yet, not with all these people watching. So I simply said, "Allah has been merciful. I feel stronger." It was not entirely a lie, as all healing ultimately comes from God. But I also knew it was not the complete truth. Within an hour, our home was filled with family members who had been summoned to witness this impossible development. My father arrived with several of my uncles. The imams who had been praying for me were called. Everyone wanted to see with their own eyes that the man who had been dying in bed for 8 months was now standing, walking, and speaking clearly. They examined me, asked me questions to test my mental clarity, watched me move around the room, The transformation was so dramatic and sudden that some suggested I should be taken immediately to the hospital for examination, both to confirm the healing was real and to try to understand what had caused such a miraculous turnaround. My father, overcome with emotion, fell to his knees and began praising Allah loudly. Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! He has heard our prayers and healed my son. Others joined in, and soon the room was filled with voices declaring praise to Allah for this miracle. I stood in the center of this celebration, receiving their congratulations and witnessing their joy. But inside I was torn. They were giving credit to Allah for something that had happened when I called on the name of Jesus. They were attributing this healing to the Islamic prayers that had been offered for months without result, when in reality, the healing had come the moment I said, I am healed in Jesus' name. But I could not tell them this, not yet. I was still processing what had happened myself, still trying to understand what it meant that Jesus had healed me when Allah had not. I needed time to think, to pray, to figure out what to do with this knowledge. The next several days were a blur of medical examinations and family gatherings. We went to the hospital where I had been treated before, and the doctors were astounded. They ran comprehensive tests and found that all the abnormalities that had been present in my blood work and scans were gone. My immune system was functioning normally. The inflammation that had been attacking my body had disappeared. Neurologically, I was completely healthy. They could find no trace of whatever disease had been ravaging my body for 8 months. The doctors had no explanation. They used words like spontaneous remission and unexplained recovery, but you could see in their faces that they were baffled. One of my doctors, a specialist who had been particularly invested in my case, took me aside privately and said, Khalid, I have been practicing medicine for 30 years. And I have never seen anything like this. Your case was one of the most severe and mysterious I have encountered. Whatever was destroying your body should not have just stopped and reversed like this. This is, medically speaking, impossible. I do not know what happened, but something beyond my understanding has occurred. Over the following weeks, my recovery continued. The weight I had lost began returning as I was able to eat normally again. My strength increased daily until I was able to resume normal activities. The pain that had been constant for so long never returned. It was as if the 8 months of severe illness had been erased, and my body was being restored to health, even better than it had been before I got sick. Throughout this recovery period, I could not stop thinking about what had happened in my room that afternoon when I called on Jesus. I replayed the experience over and over in my mind, trying to understand it, trying to reconcile it with everything I had been taught as a Muslim. I had spent 8 months praying to Allah with no answer, but one prayer to Jesus had resulted in immediate dramatic healing. What did this mean? I began searching for information about Jesus secretly, using private browsing on my devices and being careful not to let anyone see what I was researching. I read about his life, his teachings, his claims to be the Son of God. I read testimonies from other Muslims who had encountered Jesus and converted to Christianity, and their stories resonated with my own experience. I found myself drawn to Jesus in a way I had never been drawn to any religious figure before, including Muhammad. About a month after my healing, I knew I needed to tell Aisha the truth. We were alone in our bedroom one evening, and I said I needed to talk to her about something important. She could tell from my serious tone that this was significant, and she sat down on the bed with a worried expression. I told her everything. I described finding the Christian healing video, the preacher's words that seemed to speak directly to my situation, my desperate decision to lift my hands and call on Jesus' name, and the immediate powerful healing that followed. I explained that while everyone was giving credit to Allah and the Islamic prayers, the truth was that my healing had come from Jesus Christ. Aisha's face went through a range of emotions as I spoke. Shock, confusion, fear, and then something I did not expect. She began crying, but they were not tears of distress. She was crying with what looked like relief. When she could speak, she said, "Khalid, I need to tell you something I have been afraid to share. For the past 2 months, since shortly before you were healed, I have been having dreams. The same dream over and over several times a week." She described how in these dreams a man dressed in brilliant white would appear to her. His face radiated kindness and authority, and he would speak to her without moving his lips, communicating directly to her heart. He would tell her not to be afraid, that her husband was going to be healed, that she needed to trust in him even though she did not understand everything yet. The first time she had the dream, Aisha had been terrified. As a Muslim woman, having dreams about any man other than her husband was troubling, even if the dream seemed spiritual rather than inappropriate. She had tried to dismiss it as stress and worry about my illness manifesting in strange ways. But when the dream kept recurring with the same message and the same figure, she began to think it might be something more. Then, just a few days before my healing, the man in white had appeared in her dream again and said something more specific. He said, "Your husband will be healed very soon. When he is healed, he will tell you about me. Believe what he tells you, because I am the one who will heal him. I am Jesus, and I have heard your cries for your husband." Aisha had woken from that dream shaken, not understanding what it meant. She had been taught all her life that Jesus was just a prophet, nothing more. Why would he be appearing in her dreams making such claims? She had been too afraid and confused to tell anyone about the dreams, including me. But when I was suddenly healed, and then came to her a month later telling her that Jesus had healed me, suddenly her dreams made sense. Jesus had been preparing her for this moment, showing her in advance that he was the source of the healing, so that when I told her the truth, she would be ready to believe it. We held each other and cried together, both overwhelmed by the realization that Jesus had not only healed me, but had also been working in Aisha's heart, preparing her to accept the truth about what had happened. This was not just a physical healing, but a spiritual awakening for both of us. Over the next several weeks, Aisha and I began studying about Jesus together in secret. We found online resources, watched videos of teachers explaining Christian beliefs, and read parts of the Bible that we managed to access through apps that disguised their content. The more we learned, the more convinced we became that Jesus was not merely a prophet as Islam taught, but the Son of God, the Savior of the world, exactly as Christians believe. We learned that Jesus had healed many people during his time on earth, not to show off his power, but to demonstrate God's compassion and to validate his claims about who he was. We learned that he had died on a cross to pay the penalty for human sin, and that he had risen from the dead, proving his victory over death and his divine nature. We learned that salvation was not about following religious rules and doing enough good works to hopefully earn paradise, but about accepting what Jesus had already done for us and receiving forgiveness and eternal life as a gift. Everything we learned resonated with what we had experienced. I had been healed not because I deserved it or earned it through my faithfulness to Islam, but because Jesus was compassionate and responded to my desperate cry. Aisha had been given dreams to prepare her heart, not because she was especially righteous, but because Jesus loved her and wanted her to know truth. About 3 months after my healing, both Aisha and I made the decision to commit our lives to following Jesus. We did this privately, in our bedroom, with no one to witness or guide us except Jesus himself. We prayed and told him that we believed he was the Son of God, that we accepted what he had done for us on the cross, and that we wanted to follow him for the rest of our lives. We asked him to forgive our sins and make us his children. The peace that came over both of us in that moment was profound. It was the same peace I had felt when I was healed, but deeper and more complete. We felt forgiven, accepted, and loved in a way we had never experienced in Islam, despite years of faithful practice. We felt like we had finally found what we had been searching for our entire lives, without even knowing we were searching. But we also knew we had to be extremely careful. We lived in Dubai, in a wealthy Muslim family, in a community where leaving Islam was not just religiously forbidden, but could have severe social and potentially legal consequences. We could not openly declare our faith in Jesus without destroying our lives and possibly endangering our children. So we began living double lives. Outwardly, we continued to appear as devout Muslims. I resumed my involvement in the family businesses. We attended mosque for Friday prayers. We observed Ramadan when it came. But inwardly, we were followers of Jesus. We prayed to him throughout the day. We read the Bible on our devices in private. And we taught Omar and Noor carefully and gradually about Jesus, without exposing them to danger by making them speak openly about it. This double life was emotionally and spiritually exhausting. Every time I prayed the Islamic prayers publicly, I felt like I was lying. Every time I participated in Islamic rituals and celebrations, I felt like I was betraying Jesus. But I also felt trapped, unable to see a way to live openly as a Christian without losing everything and putting my family at risk. My love for Jesus and my hunger to know him more kept growing stronger. I wanted to fellowship with other believers, to worship freely, to study the Bible deeply, to tell others about what Jesus had done for me. But all of this was impossible in my situation. The frustration and longing became increasingly difficult to bear. About 5 months after my healing, my behavior began to change in ways I could not entirely hide. I was less interested in the family businesses and more interested in spiritual matters. I started asking questions in family discussions about faith that made people uncomfortable. I would challenge certain Islamic teachings gently or point out inconsistencies I had never noticed before. I stopped being as enthusiastic about Islamic charitable work and religious events. My family noticed. My father asked me several times if something was wrong, if my illness had affected me somehow beyond the physical symptoms. I tried to deflect, saying I was just processing the experience of almost dying and thinking more deeply about life and faith. But I could tell he was not entirely satisfied with my answers. The breaking point came during a large family gathering celebrating my nephew's graduation. The conversation turned to religion and politics, as it often did in our family. Someone mentioned news about Muslims converting to Christianity in other parts of the world, and the whole family began condemning such people as traitors and apostates who deserved whatever consequences they faced. I tried to stay quiet, but I found I could not. When my uncle said that anyone who left Islam for Christianity was obviously mentally ill or had been deceived by demons, something inside me snapped. I found myself saying, what if they are not deceived? What if they have genuine reasons for their choice? What if they have experienced something that convinced them Christianity is true? The room went quiet. Everyone stared at me. My father's face darkened. Khalid, why would you say such a thing? Are you defending apostates? I should have backed down. I should have laughed it off as playing devil's advocate, or said I was just trying to understand their perspective. But months of living a lie, of hiding who I really was and what I really believed, had built up pressure inside me that suddenly released. I am not defending apostasy, I said carefully. I am just saying that maybe these people have experienced something real. Maybe they have encountered Jesus in a way that changed their understanding. Maybe they are not deceived, but have found truth that we do not fully understand. My father stood up, his face red with anger. This is the effect of your illness. It affected your brain, made you confused. You need to see an imam immediately and have your faith restored properly. But my mother, who had been quiet until then, said something that made my blood run cold. Or maybe the healing was not from Allah at all. Maybe it was something else that healed you, and that something has now influenced your mind and heart. She was more perceptive than I had given her credit for. I saw in her eyes that she suspected the truth, or at least suspected that something spiritual had happened to me that was not Islamic in nature. The gathering ended awkwardly, and I knew I had made a serious mistake. Over the next several days, I was visited by various family members who wanted to talk to me about my faith and my apparent sympathy for apostates. I tried to walk back my comments, to reassure them I was still a faithful Muslim, but I could tell they were not convinced. Then one evening my father came to my home with 3 of my uncles and 2 prominent imams from our mosque. This was not a social visit. Their faces were grim and serious. They asked Aisha to leave the room and take the children upstairs. When we were alone, they confronted me directly. "Khalid, we have been hearing disturbing things about you," my father said. "Comments you have made, questions you have asked, changes in your behavior. We need you to be completely honest with us right now. Have you left Islam? Have you become a Christian?" I looked at these men I had known and respected my entire life. I thought about lying, about denying everything to protect my family and preserve my life. But I also knew that I could not keep living this way, could not keep denying the one who had saved my life when no one else could. "I have not left Islam to join Christianity," I said carefully, which was technically true since I had not formally joined any church or denomination. "But I have come to believe that Jesus is more than just a prophet. I believe he healed me when all the doctors and all the Islamic prayers failed. And I believe his claims about being the Son of God deserve serious consideration." The room erupted. My father's face went from red to almost purple. The imams began quoting Quran verses about the grave sin of shirk, of associating partners with Allah. My uncles were shouting at me, calling me a fool and asking if I understood what I was saying. One of the imams stood directly in front of me and said coldly, "What you have just confessed is apostasy. You have left Islam in your heart, even if not yet in your actions. The penalty for apostasy is death. You know this. Your family knows this. Everyone in this room knows this." My father, looking like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes, said in a broken voice, "Khalid, you are my son. I raised you in the faith. I taught you about Allah and the Prophet. How could you turn away from everything? How could you bring such shame on this family?" I tried to explain about my healing, about how desperate I had been, about the Christian video, and what happened when I called on Jesus' name, but they did not want to hear it. They interrupted me, told me I had been deceived by Shaitan, that my illness had made me vulnerable to demonic influence, that this healing was a trick to lead me away from the true faith. The conversation went on for over 2 hours. It became clear that they were not interested in understanding what I had experienced, or considering the possibility that Jesus might actually have healed me. They were only interested in getting me to recant, to declare that I was still Muslim, to denounce these dangerous ideas I had embraced. Finally, my father made their position clear. He said, "Khalid, we are giving you 1 week. During this week, you will meet with the imams daily for intensive religious counseling. You will study Quran and Hadith to remember what you seem to have forgotten. And at the end of 1 week, you will either declare publicly that you renounce these Christian ideas and remain a faithful Muslim, or you will face the consequences of apostasy. If you choose to remain in this apostasy, you are no longer my son. You will be cut off from this family completely, and we will do what must be done to protect the family's honor and Islam's integrity." The threat was unmistakable. If I did not recant, they would not just disown me. They would arrange for my death, making it look like an accident or perhaps a business dispute that went wrong. In our circles, such things could be arranged quietly. And they believed they would be doing it for righteous reasons, to protect the family and to serve Islam by removing an apostate. After they left, I went upstairs to find Aisha waiting anxiously in our bedroom. She had heard the shouting even though she could not make out all the words. When I told her what had happened and what they had demanded, her face went white with fear. Khalid, what are we going to do? They are going to kill you if you do not renounce Jesus. And even if you do renounce him publicly, they will never trust you again. They will watch you constantly. We will never be free to truly follow Jesus. I knew she was right. We had been discovered, or at least my family now knew enough to make continuing our double life impossible. We had to make a choice. Either we renounced Jesus to save our physical lives and return to Islam, or we stood firm in our faith and faced the consequences. We spent that entire night praying, asking Jesus what we should do. We thought about our children, about the lives they would lose if we chose to stand firm. Omar was 10, with friends and school and a bright future ahead of him. Noor was only 5, still so young and innocent. What right did we have to destroy their comfortable lives because of our faith? But we also could not deny Jesus after what he had done for us. He had healed me when no one else could. He had revealed himself to both of us. He had given us peace and joy and truth that we had never found in Islam. How could we turn our backs on him to preserve our wealth and status? By morning, we had made our decision. We could not renounce Jesus. We would have to leave Dubai, leave our family, leave everything we had known. It was terrifying and heartbreaking, but we knew it was the only way to remain faithful to the one who had saved us. Over the next 3 days, moving quickly and quietly, we made arrangements to flee. We could not access much of our wealth because most of it was held in family accounts or investments that my father controlled. But I had some personal accounts that I transferred what money I could to secure locations. We packed only what we could carry in suitcases without arousing suspicion from our household staff. We told Omar and Noor we were taking a family trip, that it would be an adventure. We did not tell them yet that we were leaving permanently, that we would never return to Dubai, that they would never see their grandparents or their friends again. They were too young to keep such a secret, and we could not risk anyone finding out our plans before we could escape. On the 4th day after my father's ultimatum, before the week was up, we left. We took a taxi to the airport, boarded a flight to Jordan, and from there made our way through several countries, each time moving to a new location, trying to cover our tracks. The underground network of believers that we had connected with online helped us, providing contacts and safe houses along the way. When my family discovered we were gone, they immediately blocked all my access to family business accounts and investments. Everything I had worked to build in the family companies, all the wealth I had helped generate, was taken away instantly. They declared publicly that I had suffered a mental breakdown following my illness and had abandoned my family, bringing shame on the Al Maktoum name. They put out word through their networks to find us and bring us back for our own safety. We eventually made our way to a country I cannot name for security reasons. This is where we have been living for the past 6 months. We found a small apartment in a crowded neighborhood where we could blend in and be less conspicuous. We have very little money, as most of what I managed to take with us has been spent on travel and basic living expenses. I work whatever jobs I can find. I have worked construction, driven delivery vehicles, cleaned buildings, done odd jobs, work that I never imagined I would do, work that is far beneath what my education and experience qualify me for. But I am grateful for any job that allows me to feed my family, even though the wages are small and the work is hard. Aisha, who grew up in luxury and never had to work outside our home in Dubai, now works as well. She cleans houses for other families, does sewing and alterations, anything she can find that allows her to contribute to our survival while still being able to care for our children. Omar and Noor have adjusted as well as could be expected to this dramatic change in their circumstances. Omar understands more now about why we left. We have explained to him about Jesus healing me, about our faith, and about why we could not stay in Dubai. He has accepted Jesus himself, and though he sometimes misses his old life and his friends, he has been brave and supportive. Noor is too young to fully understand everything, but she knows we follow Jesus now, and she prays to him with a simple child's faith that puts us adults to shame. She still asks sometimes when we can go home to Dubai, and it breaks my heart to explain gently that Dubai is not our home anymore. We have found a small community of believers, other families who came from Muslim backgrounds and understand what we are going through. They have welcomed us, helped us, and become our new family in place of the family we lost. We meet together for worship and fellowship, and it is the only time during the week when we can worship Jesus openly without fear. Our life now is difficult beyond anything I could have imagined when I lived in my villa in Dubai. We struggle financially. We live in cramped conditions. We miss our extended family despite everything that happened. We worry about being discovered and deported back to the UAE, where we would face arrest or worse. But we also have something we never had before. We have truth. We have Jesus. We have the assurance of salvation and eternal life. We have peace in our hearts, even when our circumstances are stressful. We have witnessed firsthand that Jesus is real, that he heals, that he saves, and that he is worth losing everything to follow. I'm sharing this testimony for several reasons. First, to give glory to Jesus Christ, who healed me when medical science failed and Islamic prayers were powerless. He is real, he is compassionate, and he still performs miracles today for those who call on him in faith. Second, to encourage other Muslims who may be questioning their faith or who have had encounters with Jesus but are afraid to follow him because of the cost. I understand that fear because I lived it. I know what you stand to lose, but I also know what you stand to gain, and it is worth it. Jesus is worth everything. Third, to ask for prayer. My family and I need your prayers desperately. We need prayer for provision as we struggle to make ends meet in our new life. We need prayer for safety as we live with the constant awareness that my family is looking for us and would harm us if they found us. We need prayer for wisdom as we navigate raising our children in these difficult circumstances. We need prayer for strength to continue following Jesus even when the cost is so high. And we need prayer for my family back in Dubai. Despite everything they have done, I love my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, my extended family. I pray for them every day, asking Jesus to reveal himself to them the way he revealed himself to me. I pray that one day they will understand that I did not leave them because I stopped loving them, but because I found a truth I could not deny. I pray that they too will encounter Jesus and discover the same healing, the same salvation, the same peace that I have found. If you are in a position to help families like mine who have lost everything to follow Jesus, I encourage you to support ministries and organizations that help persecuted believers. We could not have survived these past months without the help of believers who understood our situation and were willing to assist us practically and financially. And if you are someone who has never considered that Jesus might be who he claimed to be, I encourage you to seek him with an open heart. Ask him to reveal himself to you. He is not far from any of us, and he responds to those who genuinely seek him. You do not have to understand everything or have all your questions answered before you come to him. You just have to be willing to follow truth wherever it leads, even if it leads you away from everything you have known. My name is Khalid Al Maktoum. I was a wealthy businessman from Dubai, raised as a devout Muslim who spent 8 months dying of a mysterious illness that the best doctors in the world could not cure and the most devoted Islamic prayers could not heal. Jesus Christ healed me in an instant when I called on his name in desperate faith. That healing led me and my family to accept Jesus as Lord and Savior. It has cost us everything materially, but given us everything spiritually. I do not regret my choice. Even in our current poverty and difficulty, Even with all we have lost, I would make the same decision again. Because I have found the truth, and the truth has set me free. Jesus is real, Jesus heals, and Jesus is worth following no matter what it costs. That is my testimony. I pray it will encourage you, strengthen your faith, and inspire you to seek Jesus with all your heart. He is faithful, and he will never disappoint those who truly seek him. May God bless you and lead you into all truth. And please remember to pray for families like mine who have given up everything to follow Jesus. We need your prayers and support more than you know. Thank you.